afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another Secret Sunday session today. Today, I'm joined by Kath Koschel, which I feel very excited and privileged to have Kath on today because I was lucky enough to speak with Kath at one of our local schools a couple of years ago now, and I'm so excited that we're able to reunite and I'm able to be here and share her story and what she's been through, because I think it's phenomenal what she's been through, but also what she's doing now. And so welcome, Kath. Thank you so much for jumping on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and it's so good to see you again.
Absolutely. Even if it's via Zoom, it's the modern world, unfortunately. But I know a little bit about your story, and for those people that don't know who you are, you went through a lot of adversity during your life, and still to this day, we still face challenges no matter who we are. But when you were younger, obviously in your 20s, you went through quite a lot, and it obviously started around your professional cricket career. For those people that are not aware, I want to dig a little deeper and go, why did you want to play cricket and how did your career sort of take off?
I'm one of four kids, so I'm very lucky to have a big family. And my dad's parents and my mum's parents and both my parents actually are from a really small country town. And when we were little, my brothers and I've got three older brothers. So the youngest and only girl, we used to just play cricket in the backyard with each other, certainly when we were in Finley back at my grandparents' house, and even out the front of mum and dad's place and all that kind of stuff. So I think at the start, perhaps it was a way for me to be able to bond and connect with my brothers. Like I just wanted to be one of them and running around in the backyard with them and to do everything that they were doing because they were having a lot of fun. And the traditional path for, little girls was sort of ballet and tap and all these sorts of things. And I just wasn't interested because I just wanted to be with my brothers. So I think that's how I found the game, playing with them. And my dad loved it. And so did like most of my family. So I found the love of the game with them and then sort of went and played in the local boys competition. So I was the only girl in the team. And then it wasn't until probably my early teens I kind of found the women's path. Like the profile was nowhere near as big as it is here now, this in 2023. So it wasn't a traditional path by any stretch, but I think what started as me connecting with my brothers just developed into, it was absolutely my first love. I still love cricket. I've had it on, with the Ashes on overseas at the moment and all that kind of stuff I've been watching. And it's been absolutely fantastic. So a couple of late nights and stuff like that, but I don't think the love will ever be lost. But sort of unfortunately for me, my career was almost, my professional career was over before it had begun. So it wasn't for me in terms of, playing in a playing sense, but still quite involved. My best friend still plays representatively and at the elite level, and had a career prior to what I'm doing now in cricket operations at Cricket New South Wales and Cricket Australia, and also was a sort of player advocate through the ACA as well. So I think it's in my blood, that's for sure, and I just love it, yeah.
Amazing. And talk us through those first moments when you say you were almost there, you're almost sort of excelling in your professional career, and then what happened?
Yeah, as I said, I loved it so much. So it was never that you had to hold me back from training or anything like that. I wasn't the most naturally gifted player. So I think what I lacked in that natural, you got those naturally freaky kind of players who just don't have to train in there. That wasn't me by any stretch. Everything that I, sort of the accolades or the level that I reached, I really had to work hard for. And it could have been a combination of overuse, so training too hard. Could have been a condition I was born with. We're not really sure what happened, but I'd been scanning up because I'd had some sort of issues with my left leg. I couldn't actually feel my left big toe for a while, and I had a bit of nerve pain through my left leg as well. So I'd told our physio that I was playing for New South Wales, and they sort of scanned me up, and we realised I had a prolapsed disc in my spine. And we knew it was a bit of a risk to continue to play, but I'd never been in that good of form in my life. I was hitting 100 after 100, and if I wasn't hitting hundreds, I was hitting 50s, and was going really, really well. And I kind of got handed this opportunity that was almost too good to be true, where there was some injuries above me. And I thought, it's my first crack at this. And they sort of gave me a 50-50 chance. They said, look, we're not going to rule you out, but we're not going to rule you in. These are the risks identified with playing, none of which were really articulated as to what happened to me. But I chose to play because I was a cricket tragic, and I still am. And yeah, that risk that I took, I don't have any regrets. It sort of led to me breaking my back, actually. So I sort of, was fielding cover, which is the position between the batter and the bowler, and the ball got hit past me very quickly. And as I twisted like that to my left to turn and chase the ball, the disc just went out really, really quickly, and the vertebrae had nowhere to go, and kind of the rest is history, I guess. But yeah, not only did that dream just vanish in front of my eyes of, no more cricket, it was, I was told I was a paraplegic and I'd never walk again. So it was a very big fall from grace to go from, the elite of the elite in sport, the sport that you love, to, it's life in a wheelchair. You're never going to move your legs again. Heavy blow, for sure. I was 23 at that point in time. And I think I'd always, I've only probably recently reflected back. I've just written a book, and I get lots of questions off lots of different people all the time, because there's more to my story, which I know we'll uncover. But I think at that point in my life, it was almost like I believed that I was still going to get back on the park. And I reflected back on as to why I believed that. Is it, was there a sense of naivety because I was an adult, but I was quite young, and maybe I have got a little bit of a naive mind, but I don't mind that. It keeps me curious and all that kind of stuff. But I also think that my identity was so wrapped around this concept of being a cricketer. And I think a lot of athletes tend to struggle with this loss of identity once their career ends. It could be that, they're 40 and their career's just naturally faded because of age and performance and things like that. It could be that an injury abruptly stops it. It could be they're just delisted because they're not, sort of cutting the mustard at that level. And it's an interesting thing, like as a teenager, you kind of, I was, and a lot of my teammates who were quite good at sports, you're often labelled as Kath the cricketer. You go to a party or something like that, and they go, oh, here's Kath, she's really good at cricket. And so suddenly I'm getting this reinforcement that the only thing that's really interesting about me is that I'm good at cricket. Like, no one's saying, this is Kath, she's a really good person, she's kind, she's caring, she's considerate, or anything like that, or she's one of 4 kids and the only girl. It was just that she plays cricket. And same for like some of the boys that I went to high school with. Oh, he's the good footy player. And so you're constantly getting this reinforcement that the only thing that's interesting about me is that I'm good at cricket. And when it's taken away from you that abruptly, you're kind of left there going, wow, not only have I got this huge rehab and recovery ahead of me, but the only thing that was ever interesting about me is that I played cricket, and now I don't do that. So what am I good for? Like, how do I contribute to the world? Like, what? And so I think that could have played a large part of the naivety that I had, in that I was always convinced I was going to get back on the park, even though I was told time and time again that I was never going to walk again. So it's an interesting, thing to consider for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because I think as well, as a young person, you kind of feed off that. Like, you want to be that known as that good cricketer or that good footy player or that good netball player. It's like all that other stuff doesn't matter. But if you're, Ashley, that good player, it's something of you're of value and you're of significance. And I think at a young age, it's really hard to change that mindset when you kind of want that attention.
Yeah, in some ways for sure. Like, and I guess if you are good at the chosen thing that you do, you work hard for it, don't you? So it's almost like you wear it like a badge of pride. So like I'm going, I think I'm good at playing cricket. And people are telling me I'm good at playing cricket. It's a reinforcement of that. And so, cool, great. I'm glad that I'm known as that, because that's what I want. And absolutely. And when we're young and growing up, school's our world, isn't it? It's we haven't had the life experience that we've had as a 20-year-old or a 30-year-old, and being in a workplace and having to deal with different people and all those sorts of things. So it becomes really important, absolutely. And they're fundamental years in shaping us and shaping our identity, really. So big challenge to have it just stripped straight like that from you. So for sure.
Absolutely. And I mean, looking at that transition, it was so big for you, as you said, so young, and you had that naivety that probably kept you going. But how did you deal with, obviously there's so many physical implications that can happen with that and so many changes in lifestyle, but how did you cope with that mentally?
Yeah, I think the naivety it helped certainly in the early stages, because for me, as a kid growing up, I've lived a very privileged life, not in that my parents weren't made of money. It was not like that at all. We were a sort of at one point, a single income family with a policeman's wage and 4 kids to feed. So it wasn't high wealth. It was just a lot of love. And I always felt like I had, mates in my brothers, and I just never missed out on anything, which was great. And I'm white, and so I was sort of born into that, which was great, but no adversity really to speak of until this kind of happened, and that naivety kicked in. But after that first broken back that we've just spoken about, it just seemed like there was this 10-year period of adversity and then recovery, and then more adversity and then recovery, and then more adversity and then recovery. And so it constantly felt like I was, a swimming analogy. I'm swimming upstream a lot of the time, just trying to keep my head above water to breathe. And I was in this survival mode for a very long period, which in some way, when you're fighting like that, it does give you that protective factor, because you don't have the aftermath to think back on, God, that was hard, and God, I need to grieve that, and all that kind of stuff. So in the early stages, I think that was my protective sort of, factor, is that I had a very youthful naivety about me, but also that I was constantly trying to survive. But I'll never forget, it was I had to go to rehab to learn how to walk again, against all odds. And I was there for sort of 12 to, well, they said I was going to be there 6 to 12 months, which it honestly felt like a lifetime sentence, when you've gone from being able to use your body, in an elite way to play cricket or sport or whatever it is that I was doing, to then, living in a very stale environment of rehab, which is just not conducive to thriving. That was a big fall from grace for me. And I was on day 6 of my rehab. So I hadn't even lasted a week, and I was just struggling. Like, I'd never faced, as I said, any adversity, and my mental health had always been pretty good. Like, I'm sure it ebbs and flows like everyone else's, but I'd never really had a mental health concern to speak of, really. And oh my God, it hurt. Like, I was on day 6, and I'll never forget it. I remember not really knowing what to do. I got way too far ahead of myself. I was like, I haven't even lasted a week. I haven't even hit that week milestone yet. And I don't know how I'm going to do this. I've got nothing in me. I don't think I can. And I picked up my phone, and I'm not someone that easily asks for help. It's just, I guess, being the youngest and only girl, I always felt like I had to have a bit of a grittiness about me, because if I showed weakness, then my brothers would be like, don't cry, you're being a girl, and all that kind of stuff. And I called my best mate, Erin, who's just like, we're so close, it's not funny. And I didn't really know what to do. And I called her, and I just had tears running down my face, and like, I could hardly speak. And she said, what's going on? And I said, hey, can you come and pick me up? And she said, mate, what do you mean you're in rehab 6 to 12 months? I was there visiting yesterday. And I said, I know. If that means that all of this progress is lost, then so be it, mate. I just can't do it. I don't know how to do this. It's just not something I'm up for. And I'll never forget what she said to me, which to me just really proved this point that we're not supposed to go through life alone, even though we can try and do that. And I certainly did, and all those sorts of things. But I'll never forget it. She said to me, she said, Kath, it's breaking me to hear you this way, mate. You're my best friend. And I just wish that I could trade places with you, because I'd take all this away and I'd take it on for you. But I can't. And that really kills me to say it. What I will do is, I promise you, if you call me at any hour of the day, I'll pick up. And when I'm there, we'll walk side by side together. We'll walk this journey together. And when I'm not, metaphorically, I'm going to talk you through the process. And you can cry at any moment, and you can do anything that you really need to in the moment. You can, yell into a pillow or throw something at the wall. but I'm here for you, and I've seen you do hard things, and I know you can do this. And to me, it just really reinforced that we can't always have our own back. Like, we're allowed to break, we're allowed to mend, we're allowed to do whatever we need to do in any given moment. And it just really meant everything to me, just to have her belief instilled in me. But yeah, from a mental, like, I was never diagnosed, until later with a mental health concern or a mental health disorder. But in that moment, it was the first sort of, sign of any kind of mental ill health that started to creep in, where I had a lot of head noise and a lot of doubts and all those sorts of things, which was a big shock to me, because, as I said, up until that point, no sort of mental health concern to speak of. So, for me, and we'll go into more of my story, I'm sure, later, but just as a sort of precursor or a preface, like, I haven't gone through any of my life alone. And I think, I get a lot of people reaching out saying, you're so resilient and you're so this and you're amazing and all that kind of stuff. But there's always been people in my life, and I've made some terrible mistakes and decisions and stuff like that when I've been struggling quite deeply. There's always been someone to catch me when I'm falling. Like, I've got an amazing support network in my family and mental health practitioners and doctors and friends and all that kind of stuff. And they've never given up on me. And I think that's what makes the story more remarkable. Not that I've done it and I've gone through all these things. It's more that I've had people that have supported me to do that, which again just reinforces that we're born to connect, and we can't go through life alone.
Oh yeah, my whole face and body just got goosebumps then, because I know the feeling. I honestly do. And I know going through any challenge that you have in life, you can't go through it alone. And I honestly feel that, as you said, we're meant to connect and we're meant to have people around us. And how you get through those challenges is with people by your side. And you just have to find the strength within you, honestly, just to reach out and to find that right network that are willing to walk with you. And I think that's so beautiful that you found that in your friend. As I said, goosebumps on my face. It's amazing. But then I guess that, transitions into the next moment. I mean, you get over one battle and then you face another. How on earth do you keep going and not resent the world and not give up hope and not chuck in the towel and be like, see you later, I am done? How do you get up and just keep going once you've hit the next one?
Again, I think it was sort of, actually, I read, my partner and I, this is probably shameful to say, but over the past week, we've watched the entire series of a nighttime after work and things like that of, I don't know if you've seen it, Afterlife.
Oh yeah, yes.
With Ricky Gervais. Not for anyone under the age of 18.
I was about to say.
Quite inappropriate. But speaks to a man who's sort of in a heavy period of grief of life. And I think what he realizes amongst it all is that there's a lot of kindness. And I certainly had that same revelation. So watching that, which I'd never watched up until this, past week, it was a huge reminder for me that my beliefs and what I believe in and what I now do for a living with Kindness Factory and so forth, it really is important. And what I mean by that, I founded an organization in 2015, and it's called the Kindness Factory. And really it was a realization that I'd been through a hell of a lot in life. And there was one thing that really stood out as the most paramount thing, to be a shining beacon of light amongst the struggle. And that was human kindness. When I was in a wheelchair, I remember I just got told I'd probably never walk again. I'm in a wheelchair, and I'd left the sort of consult room of my doctors, and it was a pretty heavy blow. As I said, you go from the elite of the elite to a wheelchair, told you're never going to walk again. And my emotions were just getting the better of me. I was in rehab, and I sort of was in the upstairs part. So I needed to get into the elevator to get downstairs, and it was quite public. There was just people everywhere. And I was just about to burst into tears at any moment. And I just wanted to get in the privacy of my own room, because I knew that it would erupt and it would be a very ugly cry. But I just couldn't suck the air in. When you're sort of about to cry and you're trying to suck the air in, you can't, and then it makes it worse. And it was like that. And I'm sitting at this elevator shaft kind of thing in this wheelchair, and I couldn't reach the lift button because I'm in this chair and it was low and it was just out of reach. Like I'm talking like that and I'm trying to reach for it and I just couldn't. And I'm sure any other day I could have had the strength to sort of kind of move my arm up a bit further, but I just couldn't that day. And this random stranger walked past, must have been a visitor of someone's, and saw that struggle. And when I had my head down, feeling completely defeated, like that was going to be the rest of my life, he just pressed the button for me. And he walked off and he must have gone wherever he was going next. And then I just heard the ping of the, elevator arriving. And that's when I lifted my head and realized that he'd done it. And I got myself into the elevator, went downstairs, got into my room, and suddenly felt like I didn't even need to cry anymore, because there was someone who just cared enough to help in that moment of rock bottom. And those are the moments, I think, when we're in a struggle that can mean the difference between coping and not coping. And I remember just sort of looking at myself in the mirror that day, and tears did escape eventually, but just thinking to myself, okay, it just felt like he believed in me somehow. And I was just like, okay, when I reflected back amongst after going through all of these adversities, those are the moments that really stood out to me as moments that really caught me when I was falling and things like that as well. So it wasn't just family and friends, which honestly I wouldn't be here without them, but it was also random strangers who cared enough to help. And I reckon that's the greatest privilege about being alive, is that we can impact someone that we don't even know's day in the most amazing and meaningful of ways. And you might not even know that you're doing that in that moment. And that's a pretty good thing to think about, I reckon. Like the next person that you walk by in the street and you compliment them on their smile, or give them, whatever it is that you do, they might need a helping hand and you care enough to help. Like that moment can change the course of someone's life. And I think that's the true beauty about being alive. That's what I believe anyway.
That's beautiful. And I feel that we really do take those moments for granted, in the sense that we think they're so inconvenient, or sometimes we're shy, or no, we can't do that. But simple things, as you say, can change someone's whole world in that moment. And I think it's phenomenal that it really sparked the belief in you and in yourself, because I mean, that gentleman probably had no idea the impact that he was creating and what he did for you and your recovery. So amazing. And I really want to dig into kindness in a whole different, I feel, episode needs on kindness. But I want to then talk to you about, so you were told you were never able to walk again. You then are able to walk away again. Congratulations. I mean, that willpower, that strength, and that team that you had around you to get you to that. How did you feel knowing that you then accomplished that?
Yeah, I kind of didn't get that champion moment to sort of celebrate it, in that more adversity was to strike amongst that sort of period of my life. So I was in rehab, and as tough as it was, having to call my best friend and get that reinforcement several times over, my life did change in a really good way. A month into my stay, I met a fellow patient whose name was Jim, and he'd injured his spine in the Tough Mudder obstacle race. So he was on the monkey bar challenge, and someone went too early and pushed into his back, and he'd fallen very awkwardly from a height and broken his back too. So we were very similar age and a very similar mindset. And at the start, we just began as friends, and then very organically and very quickly we fell in love, which was just truly beautiful to have found love in a rehab centre when, your rock bottom moment and going through this pretty grueling recovery. It was an amazing experience, I think, for both of us. And what made our time in rehab, as amongst the daily grind of it all, a bit more bearable was dreaming of a life that would exist once we'd finished rehab. So we just dared to dream in rehab, like, what's the thing that will get us through this process so that we've got something to look forward to. And, it was kids and houses and pets and all that kind of stuff. And we were going out for 12 months. And as you said, I'd successfully taught myself how to walk again. Jim had too. He had a day to go before he was to be considered an outpatient at rehab, and we'd just put the lease on the house together, and the dreams that we were dreaming were about to come true when he very tragically and very quickly passed away by suicide on his last night of rehab, which just left me completely crushed. I always sort of say time really did stop, and it kind of changed for me in that moment. I was 24, and not only had I lost this dream that I'd had since I was a little girl of playing cricket, But then I also lost the person that taught me that there was so much more to life than hitting a ball around a park, and someone who'd given me so much grace and perspective and so much to look forward to had suddenly just vanished in front of my eyes. And I don't think there's a day that's gone by since that moment in 2012 that I haven't thought that I'd just give everything to see him one more time, and just to hold him and tell him that everything's okay and it will be okay, and all of those sorts of things. But it kind of threw me into this vortex of just complete lostness. I genuinely never thought I'd be happy again. I honestly, forget happiness. I never thought I'd smile again in the aftermath of his passing. I remember I lasted about 10 months until the enormity of all of it just hit me. I had a complete emotional and mental breakdown. It was very ugly. And I kind of had this like out of body experience where I just had enough. Like I didn't know how to cope anymore. I didn't know how to articulate what was going on inside of my body. And there were a lot of people around me saying, you need to get professional help and all this kind of stuff. And I knew that, absolutely. But taking the step to do it and to understand what you're feeling, I didn't have words for it. And so I was like, I'm not going to sit across from a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a mental health practitioner, whoever it is that people were saying that I needed to address these things with, when I can't even articulate what it is that I'm feeling. And that's not the greatest of mindsets. I'm fully aware of that, but that's how I felt in that moment. And I didn't know who to turn to or how to cope. I had the most amazing support network around me, and so like people were so understanding, but I didn't really know where to start, having not experienced anything like that before. And I just had to learn a lot of things the hard way. And that's completely okay too. Sort of life's a trial and error, isn't it? We're sort of always trying new things and figuring things out along the way. But it was sort of like a 3-year therapy journey that I had to go on. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of all of the experiences. And it was just, it was constant nightmares. It was flashbacks. It was lots of different things that sort of happened throughout that period that really, it was my rock bottom moment, I think. And I think I'm someone who probably needed to reach the rock bottom moment. Like I couldn't have coasted along struggling. I had to actually reach the rock bottom moment before I accepted and started to progress to better health and better mental health. But yeah, I didn't really get that chance to celebrate the milestone of learning how to walk again, because it was thrown into a very heavy period of, grief and loss and mental health concerns. But there's no resentment for that whatsoever. It wasn't something I felt the need to celebrate either, just amongst all of that darkness as well. So but it was a pretty rough time in my life as a young adult to try and conceptualize everything that I'd been through, for sure.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm so sorry for your loss and that experience, because obviously that's something that, no matter what age you are, that's so hard to have to navigate. And especially when you're already overcome one thing to then go into another. I mean, looking at that experience, did you ever wonder, I know even myself personally, when you've lost someone to suicide, it makes you feel like sometimes, what was my role to play, and what if I did more, or what didn't I do? And did you ever felt in that situation like you felt like you just needed to know why it happened, and not finding those answers were almost traumatizing in themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're called, survivors of suicide when you've lost someone close to you in that capacity. And because my story is quite public now, I hear from a lot of people who have lost a loved one or a close friend or someone like that to suicide. And probably one of the most common questions I get asked is, how do you deal with your anger? And I remember the first time I got asked that question, I had to clarify. I said, "What can you talk me through what you mean by that?" And they're like, "I just feel so angry at them." And that just wasn't something that I felt, which it confused me at the start. I had to be very respectful, and you have to put up boundaries in the world that we're living in to protect yourself as well, just through vicarious traumas and things like that. And I did feel anger. It wasn't towards Jim. It was always towards myself. And that's probably the hardest thing, or hardest bridge that I had to get over in that sort of big period of therapy. In that I took all the blame myself. It was no one else's fault. It was all of mine. That's the type of person that I was. I was the closest to him. We're in a relationship, therefore this was my fault. I didn't see the warning signs. Were there any warning signs? But then also in the grief of it all, you look back on photos and we're both smiling, and you think to yourself, well, I was genuinely happy there. He mustn't have been, because ultimately he's passed away. And did he not mean that smile? When he said he loved me, did he not mean it? Because if he did love me, maybe my love wasn't enough. And my gosh, you go through so many different emotions and experiences. And where I had to land on it was, that I still love him. I love him with all of my heart, and I don't have any anger or resentment towards him. He was just so beautiful, and maybe this world just was too painful for him. And I hate that the decision was made the way that it was, in that he's no longer with us. And I would give anything to see him again, and to try and hold him through whatever pain it was that he was going through. Absolutely, I would. But I don't resent him for making that choice, because I don't understand his pain, and I never will. And I don't think any of us should ever judge anyone for being suicidal or having passed by that means, in that we never truly know what another person is thinking. I have hundreds of secrets that I haven't told my closest friends, my family, my partner now, anything like that. And that is because we're allowed to have our own little inner thoughts and things like that. And maybe for Jim, the pain of living was far too great. And I'll never know that. I really don't. I'll never have the answers. And in the sort of first little bit of therapy, that's the thing that I probably struggle with the most, is that I'm never going to know this. What's the point of trying to conceptualize it and go through therapy with it? Because I'm never going to know this. I'm not a mind reader. I can't go back in time. And what I had to learn and accept through sort of a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy and things like that, was that that's okay. We don't need to have control of that narrative. We need to have control of our own narrative. And control is a big word, and I'm not sure it's always a healthy thing, but I had to believe, and I still genuinely believe, that all the moments that I look back on, that we were laughing and smiling and happy, and even the moments that we were quite vulnerable with each other as well, that they were true, and that they were as I experienced them, because that's the emotion that I was feeling in that moment. And what he cared to share with me, in that I'm so happy right now, or this is the thing I'm looking forward to most for our time together outside of rehab, or whatever that may have been that we were talking about. I just had to believe that they were true, because that was my reality. And I do believe that genuinely in my heart. And I'll never know why, and that's okay. I've sort of come to live with that. But that's not to say that I don't dip into wanting to know as well. I'm a human being who, has wishes and all those sorts of things. But the love has never been lost for him. I think I still love him, even not in a physical sense. Obviously, he's not here and all those sorts of things. But there's no anger or resentment or anything like that. And I really had to learn to love myself post that period of life, which was, as I said, a very big journey of therapy and understanding myself a bit more, and the world around me, and how I wanted to show up and all those sorts of things. But it took a long time, but it was definitely worth it. And I'm glad that I did it as well.
I mean, you mentioned there as well that you put a lot on yourself during that time. Have you now forgiven yourself and moved on?
Yeah. It's interesting as well. I've got a new partner now. We've sort of been dating for close to a year. And I've had partners since. It's been 10 years since Jim passed. But for a good while there, I there was no way that I was ever going to date, for example, because why would anyone want to date me? I kept thinking, the one person that I cared enough to love, Jim was my first boyfriend. I'd always been too obsessed with sport to consider having love and that being a distraction and all that kind of stuff. And so I think like I'd, built up a lot of these walls really as to, not that I wasn't good enough or lovable or anything like that, but more so, was I too damaged? Would people hear about what I'd been through and just run a million mile? And, I used to hear all this stuff. I'm not a girly girl. You can probably, with 3 older brothers and all that kind of stuff, self-love's the most important kind of love. And you hear all that kind of stuff and you're like, oh yeah, sure. Like all that kind of stuff. But it's true. I kept showing up in relationships, sometimes thinking that, a new relationship would save me or heal me or something like that. But I had to do the inner work on myself and learn to love myself, warts and all. And I think that once I understood that and did that, I could then show up as my most authentic self into any kind of friendship even, or relationship, or whatever it is, like professional relationship. Showing up as my true and authentic self was a really important thing. And I think I have forgiven myself. And as I said, that's still a work in progress every single day. I have bad days just like the rest of us, where an anniversary pops up and I get sad again, or something reminds me of something from my past, not necessarily even just gym, like it could be any kind of rehab moment or something like that. And I'm like, whoa, that just threw me back into a vortex of hard. Like, it's just hard to remember that stuff that I had to go through and endure and all that kind of stuff. And I go through dips and ebbs and flows just like the rest of us, for sure. But I'm constantly reinforced and reminded, because of the work that I do every single day, of the world being a really good place too, and that there's so much beauty that exists around us, even amongst the tough moments as well. So I found that to be quite helpful for me, to be able to celebrate kindness and happiness and goodness that exists around us. So that's been quite good. But I think the short answer to the question, because I know I've just done a long answer, but the short answer is yes, but it's a continual work in progress as well.
Yeah, like for all of us, I feel that you can never really settle. You've always got to just keep pushing through, and you're constantly going to be faced with challenges, but it's finding those little moments of kindness or self-love or whatever that looks like for you through that. Do you get a break coming out of that and obviously going through so much therapy, finding yourself and feeling like life is somewhat steady? Do we hit another point?
We do, yeah. Went on this therapy journey and was really starting to thrive again. I'd started Kindness Factory, which was almost just like a social media page of goodness, where people would submit, or I would do acts of kindness and share them on social media. So just really small things. And that was going great. And I had a great job. I was working in sport, which was fantastic. And I ended up sort of talking to my doctors, having recovered physically pretty well. I still can't feel my left leg. But other than that, no sort of residual effects from my injuries. And we sort of had a discussion, and they said, look, we reckon you'd be a pretty good triathlete. Your recovery was based in a pool. You're a very good swimmer. You can ride a bike. We've seen you do that in recovery. Why don't you add in a run? You could be a really good triathlete. And it was something that I really felt like I needed in my life, like a physical challenge or something to work towards, because I'd always been quite fit and athletic and all that kind of stuff. And so I signed up for a tester triathlon. I loved it. And I ended up being the first person with my disability to do a half Ironman. I did it in 2015 on the Sunshine Coast, and it was fantastic. I loved it so much, and I did so well that I actually qualified for a full Ironman. So a 3.8k swim, 180-kilometer bike ride, and a full marathon at the end. And training was on track, and I was the fittest I've ever been in my life. And with my best friend Erin, who I mentioned earlier, we decided to go for a training bike ride one day. It was about 4 months out from the event. And we were going from Cronulla in the south of Sydney to Manly, which is the north side of Sydney. And we're going to have breakfast there and then go back. And it was about 90 kilometres, so nothing in the grand scheme of the training that I'd been doing to that point. And I got to the north side of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, so nearly at the halfway mark, and I started making my way toward a right-hand turn lane to head into the northern beaches. And suddenly I just felt a thud on my body, and everything went black. I got hit by a drunk driver from behind, and I broke my back again. I broke it in 4 places. I shattered my left hip and broke my right wrist and dislocated my neck. And then worst part was, waking up 2 weeks later to the news that I was paralyzed and that I'd never walk again for the second time in my life. Sort of, there was more adversity to follow in a pretty big way. It was a very, very serious accident that I nearly didn't come back from, which was pretty tough.
Yeah, in that moment, I mean, waking up in that hospital bed, how do you wake up and go, I need to do this all over again? How am I supposed to process this? How am I supposed to go through all of this again? What is running through your head?
Yeah, a lot of that. I don't know that I ever fell into the why me. Again, because it was just one hit after another. It honestly just felt like that. And I re-engaged with a psych probably only been like 2 years ago, and it was amongst COVID, and it wasn't because I was necessarily struggling. COVID was actually I feel horrible saying it because it was so tough for so many people. It was almost like a blessing in disguise for me, because I'd spent so many years. I'm now a motivational speaker, and I do that a lot. So I travel the world doing that, and I'm constantly on planes and speaking everywhere, and in different time zones and all that kind of stuff. And COVID gave me that chance to pause. And I remember thinking to myself, when I was given like the freedom and flexibility and space to actually think, well, what do I want to get out of this period of that I don't often get? I don't get a chance to sit still or anything like that. So what do I want to do with this time? And I wanted to be able to look back and, have improved some things and got my health back on track. When you're traveling that much, your health starts to deteriorate just because of the lack of sleep. And that was great. But I still sort of felt like I had a bit to process, but I couldn't really figure out what it was. And when I went and saw the psych, it was a different psych this time. She sort of said to me, amongst several sessions and things like that, was when almost not treating each of these things, like, yes, they're all very traumatic in their own right, but it's almost like we've got to treat this prolonged period of trauma because you've never been given the space to just breathe through it. You've had to go through one, and then you might just go, holy moly, I've just gotten out of that. Well, here's the next one. So you actually never really got a chance to process any of them in their own right, let alone all of them kind of together. And so it wasn't necessarily, it was trauma-informed care and processing and all that kind of stuff. But I think I like for 10 years, I was living in survival mode. Up until sort of 2022, until we had this revelation, which is very recent, I was just constantly going through one thing. And it was almost like then I'd get through this next thing and have this great moment where I was doing really, really well. But then it was almost like I was holding my breath. What's going to happen next? Like, who's going to hit me with their car? Or am I going to get eaten by a shark? Or what's going to happen? And I didn't even realize I was living that way. And so I think, again, in the aftermath of that car accident, I'd just gotten so used to taking the hits that it almost seemed like I was living on autopilot. Not that I was expecting it by any stretch, but that I was just coming to expect that a lot of adversity would keep hitting me. And so I think that, again, in some way protected me from, immediate trauma response in some ways. But then I kind of had to grieve that after the fact and all that kind of stuff. So it's methods to my madness and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a lot of protective factors that I've probably learned, which aren't healthy. Like I used to use exercise as a coping mechanism, which with a body like mine, which has been injured pretty badly, it's not the best thing that you can do for yourself. But it was just with the PTSD diagnosis, I always felt like when I was running or doing something like that, it was the only time that my body and the feelings that I had would match up. So it was the only time my body would match my mind, which was always going quite fast. If I ran, then my body was going at the same pace as my mind. And so that would actually calm me down and things like that. And so I just had to learn a lot on how to have, you can still exercise and do stuff like that, but have other healthy mechanisms in place and coping strategies that aren't going to ruin your body and do things like that as well. So never fell into the victim trap though of going, oh, poor me and why me. If anything, I think perspective is one of the most powerful things that we can have as human beings. And I'll never forget waking up from that 2 weeks, and I was on life support and there's all sorts of stuff going on, which I've still not really any idea about, in that I know kind of what happened when I was out, but the decision makers were my parents. And I'm not a mum, I'm an auntie, and I'd love to be a mum one day. If I had to watch my nephew, for example, go through the things that I was and support them in the way that my parents were, it would honestly break me. Like I don't think I'd be able to do it. And that's the perspective I found, in that I remember waking up and my parents, of course, were just there. They'd never left my bedside. And I just looked at their face and they just looked so exhausted. And of course I felt that way. I'd, just been through a pretty significant, injury and near-death experience. But I remember thinking to myself, just, you're the lucky one here, because you're not them having to watch you go through this. And they cared so much about me and they love me so much. And I know that, and I'll always know that. But I just kept saying to myself, like, if, in the tired state that I was, and oh my God, there were so many times I just wanted to give up. I was so tired. And I just remember saying to myself, just breathe, because I didn't want to put them through any more, to be honest. And so I think that gave me a little bit of strength, understanding that, they were probably suffering more because they felt so helpless. And how do you keep watching your child go through that many things and just keep showing up? They just kept showing up. My parents always do that. They just show up all the time. And I'm just so lucky for that reason. And I wouldn't be here without my family, all my friends. I'm just so lucky in that sense. So I think that kind of helped, having that realization. But again, just there were so many dark days. I was in ICU for 6 weeks. I went on to the wards of the hospital for another 6 weeks, and then I went on to rehab for 6 months to teach myself how to walk again, when literally every single person gave me no chance at doing it. So yeah, it was bloody tough. It was hard, no doubt about it. But I know we're on a screen and no one can see me sort of my legs and stuff, but yeah, I can walk successfully. I still can't feel my left leg, but I can walk, and I still run occasionally and get out and do many active things and stuff like that. So I was able to sort of grind through it again, which in some ways, like, I had the experience of the first time. So it was, I had experience. And in other ways, I was just like, I remember this bit of the recovery, it's bloody hard, and I don't know if I got the energy to do it again, but just through love and people, I was able to sort of come through that period and get my life physically and mentally back on track. I think the one silver lining, I think, of going through adversity is you learn a lot about yourself. And it's tough that we have to experience the adversity, and it's tough that we have to go through the enduring nature of whatever it is that's torturing us, be it physically or mentally or whatever it is. But when we can reflect back, we understand kind of what a secret ingredient of what makes us tick. I genuinely believe that. So not in the moment, like in the moment, because a lot of people will reach out when they're struggling, like, how do I get through this? And I'm like, well, I think you got to let it suck to start with. Like, you're allowed to scream and cry and do whatever it is that you need in that moment. And it could last 1 day or it could last 10 days. Maybe you want to be in the suckiness for 2 years. Don't put a time limit on it. But at the end of it, when you do figure it out, you'll know more about yourself than what most people who haven't endured what you have will. And I think that actually is a gift when we can see it that way. And then when we're suffering again, or we have to go through another adversity, because life's bloody hard at the best of times, we might be a bit wiser the next time. And so for me, my mental journey the second time was a little bit easier, not in that it didn't suck, it absolutely sucked, but more so that I was able to reflect back and go, well, I've been through hard things before. What worked for me last time? And for me, it was things like gratitude and kindness and perspective. And so I knew that I just needed to surround myself with those things again, and that I'd be okay. And that absolutely worked for me for sure.
Oh, that is the most beautiful way to wrap everything up and say that those three things are beautiful pillars in terms of looking for ways to really recover and to actually want to, pursue that recovery, however it may look. And I think it's perfect as well when you say that it does suck. We can't turn a blind eye to life and go that it's easy, or that, some people have it better than us. We're all challenged in our own ways and all different ways at all different times. And it's finding your process. And I always think we're always a student of life, and we're constantly just learning more about ourselves and the people around us. And I think you have been on a phenomenal journey that has made you the person that you are today. And you're now sharing that with the Kindness Factory, which is amazing. What is your current mission with the Kindness Factory, and what do you intend to do with it amongst already what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, initially it was a side project to my full-time job, and we had a goal to reach 1 million acts of kindness, and there was nothing more to it. We're now at very close to 6 million acts of kindness, which has been fantastic. And just through the sharing of people all around the world of their acts and what kindness means and represents to them, we've been able to sort of develop a kindness curriculum. And that's through my own life learnings, as well as it's been sort of researched and academic based through our education partner in Kaplan. And we launched that in 2020 amongst COVID, into 60 schools, and it's a completely free resource, so it's available to anyone who wishes. And we launched that in COVID to 60 schools, and it's now in over 3,500 Aussie schools, also in the US and the UK as well. So that's been going great. So as a sort of charity, we just want to get, and I don't need to tell you this because I know your story, and like life's bloody hard at the best of times. Like it really is. Like we go through natural disasters, cancer diagnoses, mental health concerns, and things will pop up that are completely beyond our control. And what I realized through developing all of this is that there's so much unnecessary suffering that goes on in the world. And what I mean by that is man-made adversity. So if I've just said like life's hard at the best of times, we all struggle, we're all going to, like everyone is going to suffer at some point in their life. Why don't we make it even harder for ourselves? Why is there so much bullying? Why is there so much domestic violence? Why is there so much gun violence, war, terrorism? Like none of this needs to happen. And I think when you go through the depths of despair that, we have, and everyone does at some degree, for me, it just made me realize that I don't want to make life harder for anyone. I just want to be kind. And so I hope that this curriculum starts to do that as well, that it starts to stamp out a lot of that unnecessary suffering that we seem to put ourselves through. And a common response for a lot of human beings is, from a violence perspective, you hit me, I'll hit you back. You call me a name, I'll call you a name back. And I don't think it has to be that way. Sometimes we need to stop the cycle and move forward with kindness. And I think it's the ultimate strength. There's a Bob Perry quote that says, kindness is the most underrated free agent of human change that we have. And I genuinely believe in that as well. And the more of it that's out there, the better. So how do we set kids up for success and to be more resilient and all that kind of stuff? Let's get that into primary schools. So that's what that's doing. And I spend my time kind of doing a lot of corporate work, so consulting into corporate organizations off the same model. So it's 12 attributes of kindness, things like, what we've already mentioned: gratitude, empathy, compassion, perspective, positivity, etc. And that's really starting to redefine what leadership looks like as well. So it's sort of multi-angled, which is great. And then, for me, I've just written a book. So that came out in Feb this year, which is going great. Which uncovers a lot of my story and a lot of the learnings and stuff like that. It's just sky's the limit. And I spend most of my time, motivational speaking. So I do that all around the world now, which is great. I'm a very accidental speaker. So very accidentally fell into it. I actually failed my year 12 oral exam. So just goes to show that your path's not always linear. And I love it. It's a great career. It's a great job. And I love just chatting to people, which has been great too. So Lots of work to be done. There's still a lot of stuff that goes on that doesn't need to, and can be mended with kindness and care. But maybe the end goal is that we don't need to exist, because we're all operating on a basis of kindness, but we'll see how we go.
I love that. We just don't need to be here, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, we do. I mean, both of us, I would assume, love what we do in that sense. But yes, it would be nice if we wouldn't have to preach and share everything that we have to do resource wise. But no, thank you so much for jumping on today and sharing your story and what you're doing at the Kindness Factory. I'm in awe of you, and I think that what you've been through is, you know, as you said, it sucked and it's hard, but as I mentioned before, it's made you the person that you are today, and I believe I wouldn't change that for the world. So thank you so much for jumping on today and sharing your story.
And the feeling's mutual. Big fan.
Thank you. And where can everybody find you?
On socials and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to follow Kindness Factory, that's just all one word, Kindness Factory, at Kindness Factory. And me personally, my name's Kath Koschel, so it's Kath and then Koschel. So I think if you can't go wrong if you do either of those two things. But
beautiful. And I'll list everything, so don't worry, everyone, if you didn't get that. Thank you once again so much for jumping on today and sharing your story, and as well to everyone else out there for jumping on and starting the conversation with us today. I hope you got something out of it. I know I did, and I'm very grateful. So go and be kind, everyone, and we'll catch you all very soon.